Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. Today I want to go through my last TBR of the year 2025 with you. This was my autumn TBR, and we're gonna see how I did with reading these books that were on my TBR. Before we go into the individual books and I tell you whether I've read them or not, I want to talk about a couple of stats for my monthly reading. So this last quarter started out with October, and in October I had 7 books on my TBR from my, TBR pile. These are my physical TBR I had at the beginning of the year, as well as my reading goals TBR. And I had 7 books on there. Out of these 7 books, I have started 5 and finished 3 in October. And that means of all the books I read in October, 19% were TBR books. In October, I had also checked out 3 books from the library, as well as finishing 1 library book from September still. Out of these 3 books, I did read all 3 in October, as well as the one September carryover book. And that means 25% of my reading in October were library books. I didn't have a ton of spooky books on the TBR, so that's why I had to substitute a little bit from the library. In November is where we got real serious. I started my reading every book all at once thingy in November, and you will see that reflected in the numbers. So I put all the books that I spun on my wheel and started in November as TBR books. So in the end, I had 9 TBR books to read in November. Out of these 9, I started all 9 and I finished 3, as well as the 2 leftover books from October. So that means that 50% of the books that I finished in November were TBR books. And that is much better than in October. Usually I like to read at least 50% TBR books. I also had 1 book checked out from the library in November, but I did not start or finish it. So 0% of my reading in November were library books. Last but not least, for December, we added a couple of more books to the spinner wheel and to the TBR as well. So in December, I had 5 books to read in December from the TBR, and out of these 5, I started all 5 and I finished reading 2, as well as 6 more books that I had started in November. That means that 44% of my reading in December were TBR books. I read so many books in December, so even though I read a ton of TBR books, it wasn't even half. I had also checked out 1 book from the library still in December, and I did not read that one, so 0% of my reading in December were library books. So you can see that in the last 2 months of the year, I was really locked in and trying so hard to finish all of those TBR books because I was so determined to reach that 0 TBR considering my pre-2025 books. And now let's see whether I actually did that. Now behind me you see the books that I had originally planned to read in the autumn time in the last quarter of the year. However, I had some books in the previous quarters that I didn't get around to. So first of all, let's talk about those. Still on the TBR, I had The Unwomanly Face of War by Svetlana Alexievich, and I did read this one. I still had The Women's History of the Modern World by Rosalind Miles, and I did read this one. The God of the Lost Verse by H.A. Hackworth, one of the books on my TBR that I was the most determined to read, and I did read it. The 120 Days of Sodom by Marquis de Sade, I did read. I still had Wish You Were Here by Jodi Picoult, and I did finish this one. This was actually the last book in December that I finished. I still had Die Unglückseligen by Thea Dawn, and I did read this. And lastly, from the first 3 quarters, I had left over the complete fairy tales and stories by Oscar Wilde, and I did read this one. Okay, so we got all of the other books out of the way, so let's now look at the actual December TBR. And before I forget it, I had a series that I wanted to listen to as audiobooks, so I don't own them physically, and that was the Bone Witch series. We had The Bone Witch, The Hot Forger, and The Shadow Class by Rinchu Pecco, and I read all of them. Then we have Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston, and I did read this. Mort by Terry Pratchett, I did finish. 3 Cups of Tea by Greg Mortensen and David Oliver Rellin, I did read. Katzen lieben Weihnachten, a short story collection that I did finish. The Secret Years by Judith Lennox, I did read. So now you're probably thinking, wow, I knocked it out of the park, but I did not finish all of the books, unfortunately. I have this collection of Grimm's fairy tales. I did finish reading the first volume, however, I did not finish reading the second volume as well as the volume with all the notes in it. And last but not least, we had Anyway the Wind Blows, and even though I did start this one, I did not finish it. So as you've probably seen in my January TBR, I do hope to read the Grimm's fairy tales and Anyway the Wind Blows in January now, and then I will have read my complete pre-2025 TBR. That means all of the books that are now on my TBR I have acquired in 2025, and I already did a video about that. I'm not quite sure in which order I will upload them, but if it is already up, I will link it, and if it's not, then you should subscribe so you don't miss it when I upload my complete TBR pile for 2026. So because I managed to do this big clear out and I feel so much lighter now with like only new and exciting books to read for 2026, I will not do seasonal TBRs anymore. I want to try doing monthly TBRs. I think I will still do some kind of like quarterly wrap-ups, but I'm not quite sure how I will do them and what they will look like, so we will have to figure that out as we go along in 2026. I do like this format of like breaking up some information about my reading in like quarters, but yeah, I will have to see. There are a ton of options how I could organize that, but yeah, I think I still want to keep those up, but as I said, the TBR videos for now will be monthly. So let me know, what do you think? How did I do in this last quarter? Did you think that I would finish all of these books? Because honestly, I can't believe I did that. I was really locked in. I was not doing any of my other hobbies for like 8 weeks straight. I now have a ton of YouTube videos I have to catch up on. I have TV shows I want to watch. I still have not done my Stranger Things rewatch for the final season. Please do not spoil me. I'm so scared of spoilers. But yeah, I was locked in, and now I'm also ready to let go again a little bit, and yeah, maybe breathe. Breathe a little bit. But I had a lot of fun finally reading this TBR down. I hope it was fun to watch as well. If you haven't seen that yet, my vlogs in November and December were quite chaotic because of the Every Book All at Once scheme, but I thought it would be fun as well. Let me know what you think, and I will talk to you very soon. Bye!